There's a race most people are running, and the strange thing is, nobody signed up for it. Nobody chose it. Nobody planned it. It just started. One day you're young, full of energy, full of plans, and the next, you're waking up at the same time, driving the same road, sitting at the same desk, waiting for Friday, waiting for the next paycheck, waiting for something to change. But here's what nobody tells you. The waiting is the trap, not the job, not the bills, not the economy. The belief that one day, things will simply get better on their own. That's what keeps most people running in circles their entire lives. And the worst part? Most people don't even know they're in it. They think they're moving forward, but they're just moving fast, in the same direction, going nowhere. This video is about that trap, what it is, how it works, and most importantly, how some people quietly walk away from it. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear might be the most important thing you listen to this year. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat down, truly sat down, and asked yourself, where is all of this going? Not where you hope it's going, not where you tell people it's going. Where is it actually, honestly, going? Because most people, if they're being truthful, don't have a clear answer to that question. They have a vague sense of forward motion, a feeling that if they just work a little harder, stay a little later, get the next promotion, everything will eventually fall into place. And so they keep running, year after year, decade after decade, and the finish line keeps moving. This is what people call the rat race. But that phrase doesn't quite capture what it really feels like. Because a race has a finish line, what most people are living has none. It's more like a treadmill. You're moving, you're sweating, you're exhausted. But when you step off, you're in exactly the same place you started. And here's the part that most people never stop to examine. The treadmill wasn't built to help you get somewhere. It was built to keep you busy, busy enough to not ask questions, busy enough to not notice, busy enough to keep consuming, keep spending, keep borrowing. Because a person who is constantly running rarely has time to think, and thinking, real thinking, is the one thing that could change everything. See, the trap isn't just about money, it's about attention. Your attention is the most valuable thing you have, more valuable than your savings, more valuable than your salary, more valuable than anything sitting in your bank account right now. And the trap, at its core, is designed to capture your attention, to fill every moment with noise, with urgency, with the feeling that you're always behind, always catching up, always one step away from where you need to be. And while your attention is consumed by all of that, something else is happening, quietly, in the background. The gap between where you are and where you want to be keeps growing. Not because you're not working hard enough, but because hard work alone was never the answer. And nobody told you that. Nobody sat you down and explained that the system you were handed was not designed to make you wealthy. It was designed to make you productive for someone else. That's the first layer of the trap, and most people spend their entire lives inside it without ever realizing there's a way out. Think about everything you were taught growing up. Study hard, get good grades, go to a good college, get a stable job, work your way up, save what you can, retire someday. That was the plan, right? And for a certain generation, in a certain era, it worked. Sort of. But here's what nobody mentions when they hand you that roadmap. It was designed for a world that no longer exists, a world where one job lasted a lifetime, where pensions were guaranteed, where the cost of living was manageable on a single income. That world is gone, and yet the advice remains the same. Go to school, get a job, save money, as if the rules haven't changed, as if the game is still the same game, but it isn't. And the people who figured that out early didn't do it because they were smarter. They did it because someone, at some point, told them something different, something that wasn't in the curriculum, something that wasn't on any exam. Let me tell you what that something is. In school, you learn how to earn money, but nobody teaches you what money actually is. Nobody explains that money, in its purest form, is not a reward for hard work. It's a measure of value, perceived value, in the marketplace. And the moment you understand that distinction, everything changes. Because if money follows value, not effort, then the question is no longer how hard am I working? The question becomes, how much value am I creating? And those are two very different questions. A person can work 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, for 40 years, and still retire with almost nothing. Not because they didn't work hard enough, but because they were trading time for money instead of building something that creates value beyond their own hours. This is what school never taught you. That there are two fundamentally different ways to participate in the economy. You can sell your time, or you can build something that generates value with or without you. And almost everything about the way we're raised pushes us toward the first option, the safe option, the predictable option, the option that keeps the machine running, but safe, as most people eventually discover, has a price of its own. The price of safe is that you trade your most valuable years, your energy, your creativity, your prime, for a paycheck that was never going to be enough. And by the time most people realize this, they're tired, and tired people don't take risks. That's not an accident. That's the design. And understanding the design is the first step toward escaping it. There's a word that sounds safe, that sounds responsible, even wise, and that word is comfortable. I have a comfortable life. Things are comfortable enough. I'm comfortable where I am. And on the surface, that sounds fine. It sounds like contentment, like gratitude. But underneath it, if you're honest with yourself, comfortable often means something else entirely. It means, I stopped asking hard questions. I stopped pushing, stopped risking, stopped dreaming in any direction that felt uncertain. Because uncertainty is uncomfortable, and discomfort, we were taught, is something to avoid. So we find a level of life that feels manageable, and we stay there. Not because it's everything we wanted, but because it's enough to keep going. And here's the quiet tragedy of that. Comfortable is not neutral. Comfortable has a cost. Every year you spend at the level you're at is a year where inflation quietly erodes what you have, where the gap between your current life and the life you imagined grows a little wider, where the options available to you slowly narrow. Because time, unlike money, cannot be earned back. And most people don't feel this cost immediately. They feel it slowly, gradually, almost imperceptibly, until one day, 10 or 15 years later, they look up and realize how far they've drifted from where they intended to go. And by then, the comfortable life they chose doesn't feel so comfortable anymore. It feels like a cage, a very pleasant, very familiar, very well-decorated cage, but a cage nonetheless. Now, I'm not saying comfort is wrong. I'm not saying you should live in constant anxiety or take reckless risks. What I'm saying is this. There is a difference between chosen comfort and default comfort. Chosen comfort is a deliberate decision made after you've built something real, after you've created options for yourself. Default comfort is what happens when you never question the path you were given, when you simply accept the first level of stability you find and mistake it for arrival. Most people live in default comfort, not because they're lazy, not because they don't care, but because nobody ever showed them there was another option. Nobody ever explained that the treadmill has an off switch, that you can step off, catch your breath, and choose a completely different direction. But stepping off requires something most people find very difficult. It requires you to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, the discomfort of questioning everything you were told, and the discomfort of admitting that the plan you've been following might not be taking you where you actually want to go. And that discomfort is exactly where everything begins to change. Here's what's interesting about the trap. It doesn't feel like a trap from the inside. From the inside, it feels like responsibility. It feels like doing the right thing, paying the bills, showing up, keeping things together. And that's exactly what makes it so difficult to see, because you can't escape something you don't recognize. So let me show you what escaping actually looks like. Not the version they sell in self-help books, not the overnight success story, not the person who quit their job on a Monday and was a millionaire by Friday. The real version, the quiet version, the one that starts with a shift so small, most people miss it entirely. It starts with a question, not a dramatic question, not a life-altering revelation. Just a simple, honest question. What am I actually building? Not what am I earning? Not what am I saving? What am I building? Because there is a fundamental difference between people who escape the trap and people who don't. And it has nothing to do with intelligence or luck or starting with money. It has everything to do with whether they are building something or simply maintaining something. Maintaining is what most people do. They maintain their lifestyle, their bills, their routine. They work to keep things exactly as they are, which means, at best, they stay in place. Building is something different. Building means directing some portion of your energy, your time, your money, towards something that will be worth more tomorrow than it is today. Something that compounds, something that grows, something that eventually starts working for you, instead of the other way around. And here's the crucial part. You don't have to burn your life down to start building. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow, sell everything you own, and move to a cabin in the woods. You just have to start asking a different question. Instead of asking, how do I earn more money? Start asking, how do I create more value? Instead of asking, how do I save more? Start asking, how do I make what I already have work harder? Instead of asking, when will things get better? Start asking, what specifically needs to change, and what is the first step I can take today? These are not motivational questions, they are engineering questions. The difference between someone who escapes the trap and someone who doesn't is not ambition, not talent, not circumstance. It's the quality of the questions they ask themselves every single day. And most people, without realizing it, are asking the wrong questions. Not because they're not smart enough to ask better ones, but because nobody ever taught them what the right questions were. The education system taught you how to answer questions. Nobody taught you which questions were worth asking. And that gap, that small but devastating gap, is where most people's financial lives quietly fall apart. There's a pattern, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Among the people who quietly escape the trap, who build something real, who eventually reach a point where money is no longer the thing they worry about most, there is a pattern that repeats itself over and over across different backgrounds, different industries, different starting points. It's not what most people expect. It's not a secret investment strategy. It's not a lucky break or a genius idea that nobody else had. It's something quieter than that, something almost invisible. These people, at some point in their lives, made a decision to stop being consumers of their own time and start being investors of it. Let me explain what I mean. Most people treat their time the way most people treat their money. They spend it as it comes, a little here, a little there, on things that feel necessary in the moment, on things that bring temporary comfort or relief, and at the end of the week, the end of the month, the end of the year, they look back and wonder where it all went. Sound familiar? The people who escape the trap do something different. They become intentional about where their time goes, not obsessively, not in a way that strips all joy from life, but deliberately. They ask themselves a question that most people never ask. Is what I'm doing right now building something, or is it just filling time? And they develop the discipline to redirect even small amounts of time consistently toward things that compound: reading, learning, building skills that increase their value in the marketplace, creating things, even imperfect things, that exist beyond the hours they put in, investing, even small amounts, in assets that grow while they sleep. None of these things produce dramatic results immediately. That's why most people abandon them. We live in a world that rewards instant gratification, that celebrates overnight success, that makes patience feel like weakness. But the people who escape the trap understand something that the noise of modern life tries to drown out. Wealth, real wealth, is not an event, it's a process, a slow, quiet, almost boring process that rewards consistency over intensity, direction over speed, and patience over everything else. There's another thing these people share. They change their relationship with money itself. Most people see money as something to be earned and spent, a resource that flows in and flows out. And the goal is simply to make sure more flows in than out. But the people who escape the trap see money differently. They see it as a tool, not a destination, not a measure of worth, not something to be hoarded or feared. A tool, and like any tool, its value depends entirely on how you use it. A hammer sitting in a drawer builds nothing. Money sitting in a low-interest account, barely keeping pace with inflation, builds almost nothing either. But money directed intentionally toward assets that produce income, toward skills that increase earning power, toward opportunities that most people are too busy to notice. That money works while you sleep, while you rest, while you spend time with the people who matter most to you. And that shift from seeing money as something you earn and spend to seeing it as something you deploy and direct is perhaps the single most important financial shift a person can make. It doesn't require a large amount of money to start. It requires a completely different way of thinking about what money is and what it's for. And most people, because of the way they were raised, because of the messages they absorbed about money from the world around them, never make that shift. Not because they can't, but because nobody ever showed them it was possible. There's a moment that most people who escape the trap can point to. It's not always dramatic, it's not always obvious in the moment it happens, but looking back, they can see it clearly. The moment they stopped waiting and started deciding. Waiting for the right time, waiting for more money, waiting for more confidence, waiting for someone to give them permission, and then one day, for whatever reason, they just stopped waiting and made a decision. Not a perfect decision, not a fully informed decision, just a decision. To do something different, to ask a different question, to read a different book, to put a small amount of money somewhere it could grow, to start something, anything. That wasn't the treadmill. And that single decision, however small it seemed at the time, changed the trajectory of everything that followed. Because here's what most people don't understand about escaping the trap. It's not one big leap. It's a series of small steps, taken consistently in a different direction. And the first step is always the same. Deciding that the way things are is not the way things have to be. And if you've stayed with me this far in this video, I want to say something to you directly. Because it means something that you're still here. It means you're not just looking for entertainment. You're looking for something real. And this channel exists for exactly that kind of person. So if you haven't subscribed yet, I want to invite you to do that now. Not because of a number, not because of an algorithm, but because what we talk about here, this conversation about money, about freedom, about the life most people want but never quite reach. It continues every week, and I don't want you to miss what's coming next. Hit subscribe and stay in this conversation with us. Now, back to where we were. Because there's one more thing I need to tell you, something that ties everything together. The trap, at its deepest level, is not about money at all. It's about identity. Most people stay in the trap, not because they can't escape, but because they have built their entire sense of self around being inside it. Their identity is tied to their job title, their salary, their routine, and the thought of changing any of that feels like losing themselves, like becoming someone they don't recognize. And that fear, quiet as it is more powerful than any financial obstacle. It keeps people in jobs they've outgrown, in patterns they know aren't working, in a version of life that was never really theirs to begin with. But here's what the people who escape eventually discover. On the other side of that fear is not loss, is not chaos, is not the terrifying unknown they imagined. On the other side of that fear is simply a different version of themselves. One that asks better questions, makes better decisions, builds better things. One that looks back at the trap, not with anger or regret, but with quiet understanding, because they finally see it for what it was, not a life sentence, just a starting point, and starting points can always be left behind. The only question is, when will you decide to leave yours? Somewhere right now, someone is sitting at a desk, looking at a clock, counting the minutes until they can leave, and telling themselves, this is just temporary. Things will change. It'll get better, and maybe it will, but probably not on its own, because the trap doesn't loosen its grip by itself. It doesn't get easier with time, it gets more familiar. And familiar, as most people eventually discover, is not the same thing as better. Familiar is just comfortable enough to stay. And staying, year after year, decade after decade, is how a temporary situation becomes a permanent one, without anyone ever making a conscious decision for it to be so. And that's the most important thing I want you to take from this conversation. The trap is not kept in place by force, it's kept in place by default, by the absence of a decision to do something different, by the assumption that tomorrow will bring the change that today didn't, but tomorrow is just today, with a different date, and the person sitting at that desk in 10 years will be the same person sitting there now, unless something changes. And this is where it gets interesting, because the moment you start seeing money as a tool, everything around you begins to look different. You start noticing things you never noticed before. The person who owns the building where you work, the investor who bought land 20 years ago when nobody wanted it, the quiet professional who never talked about money but retired early, without fanfare, without drama. These people weren't lucky, they weren't smarter than everyone else. They just made a shift earlier than most, a shift in how they saw their time, their money, their options, and they acted on that shift consistently, over years, without waiting for perfect conditions, without waiting for certainty, without waiting for someone to tell them it was safe. Because here's the truth about perfect conditions. They never come. The market is never perfectly stable. The timing is never perfectly right. Life is never perfectly ready for you to start building, and the people who wait for perfect wait forever. While the people who start with what they have build something real, something that compounds, something that grows, something that one day looks back at them and says, you made the right call, even when it didn't feel like it, even when it was uncertain, even when nobody around you understood what you were doing. You made the right call. And that quiet confidence, that private knowledge that you are building something real, is worth more than any salary, more than any title, more than any external validation the world can offer, because it's yours, completely, entirely, undeniably yours. And that is something nobody can take from you. Not a recession, not a bad year, not an unexpected bill. Once you make the shift, once you truly see money for what it is and time for what it's worth, the trap loses its power over you, not because your circumstances change overnight, but because you change, and a changed person makes different decisions, asks different questions, sees different opportunities, and builds a completely different life, one quiet step at a time, not something outside of them, something inside, a decision, a question, a moment of honest clarity where they look at their life, really look at it, and ask, is this what I chose, or is this just what happened to me? Because there is a world of difference between those two things. A life you chose, even an imperfect one, even a difficult one, has a completely different texture than a life that simply accumulated around you. One feels like yours. The other feels like a waiting room, and too many people spend too many years in a waiting room, waiting for a door to open that they have to open themselves. The people who escape the trap don't escape because they were lucky. They escape because at some point, they stopped waiting for permission and gave it to themselves. That's it. That's the whole secret. Not a strategy, not a formula, not a shortcut. Just a decision, made quietly, privately, without fanfare. To stop running someone else's race and start building something of their own. You don't need more time. You don't need more money. You don't need more certainty. You just need to decide, and then take one step, just one, in a different direction. The rest builds itself. One decision at a time, one step at a time, one quiet morning at a time. When you wake up and realize the race you were running was never yours to begin with, and the life you actually want has been waiting for you this whole time, and that life, the one you actually want, has always been closer than it seemed. It was never waiting for the perfect moment. It was waiting for you to make a different choice, starting today, starting now. If this conversation meant something to you, share it with 5 people who need to hear it, not because it's a video, but because it might be the thing that shifts something in them. Subscribe to the channel because this conversation continues every week, and leave a comment below. Tell me honestly, do you feel like you're in the trap right now, or have you already found your way out? And if there's a topic you want us to explore next, tell me that too, because this channel exists for you, and the next video is already waiting, and so are you. The only question is, what will you do next? The answer is already inside you, and it has always been there, waiting for you to listen, waiting for you to act, waiting for you to begin. The trap ends the moment you decide it does, and that moment can be right now, not tomorrow, not next week. Right now. Don't let it pass. The decision is yours. It has always been yours, and it always will be. Choose wisely. Choose today. Choose yourself.